Village schoolgirl Naomi Smith today paid an emotional tribute to the girl she called my best and only special friend, the kindest, most generous, caring person ever. Emma Jones appealed to the public to help track down Naomi's killer. She said, "This evil person does not deserve to be on this earth." Colin Baker reports from Nuneaton.
Heavily sedated, dazed and confused by the savage murder of her best friend Naomi, Emma Jones has only one demand: for help in finding the person who killed her closest pal.
She was the kindest, most generous, caring person I've ever known. She stood by me, even when it became difficult for me. No one could replace her. I saw what that evil person did to her. I don't think I will ever forget what I found when I went into the wreck. Their family and I will find it hard to live without her. Someone must know who he is.
The man leading the inquiry wouldn't disagree. Detective Superintendent Tony Bayliss on the left showed his Chief Constable Peter Jocelyn where Emma and Naomi's father found the dead girl in the nearby recreation ground. There is a growing feeling that someone in the area is shielding the killer.
It may be through loyalty, it may be because they're not quite sure whether they should come forward. I would say, come and speak to us in confidence. We'll trust your confidence, but please tell us we can't do anything unless we get the information.
And in the local church this morning, prayers were said for the new arrivals in the parish and for the teenager who so tragically left it last Thursday. Colin Baker, ITN, Nuneaton.
The Bosnian Serbs now have less than 3 hours to withdraw their heavy weapons from Sarajevo or face renewed NATO airstrikes. Serbian sources say the pullout will be complete. The American envoy Richard Holbrooke said the next few days and hours could determine the fate of the Bosnian war. Howard Jones reports.
In Sarajevo, time is ticking away to the UN's deadline and the pace of diplomatic activity is all the more urgent. The American peace envoy has carried the same blunt message in person to the Serbs, Croats and Bosnians. The siege of Sarajevo must be lifted and lifted soon.
The next few days and hours may well determine the fate of the war.
These Bosnian Serb tanks were rolling away from Sarajevo today, but it's unlikely that all their heavy guns will be out in time to meet the UN's deadline. UN commanders will then have to choose between giving them more time or punishing them with airstrikes. The prospects for peace are finely balanced.
It's very important for the future peace, stability, prosperity and well-being of all the countries of the region that this historic opportunity for peace is not entirely lost. A lot of work needs to be done.
In Belgrade today, Serbs were praying that NATO would not resume the bombing. The next few hours and days will determine if their fellow Serbs in Bosnia have done enough to prevent further action.
The Liberal Democrat leader Paddy Ashdown today won overwhelming support from party activists for his plan to abandon the policy of equidistance between Labour and the Tories. At a meeting on the eve of their conference in Glasgow, Liberal Democrat delegates approved Mr Ashdown's decision not to prop up a minority Conservative government. But the Liberal Democrat leader stressed that didn't mean he thought the party should move towards Labour. Puerto Rico and the American Virgin Islands have been declared a disaster zone after being hit by Hurricane Marilyn. 3 people died and at least 50 were injured when an apartment block on the island of St. Thomas collapsed. Thousands of people are homeless. The Pope called today for the world to follow the lead set by South Africa in working for peace and reconciliation. John Paul II was holding his first ever Mass in South Africa. President Mandela and former President F.W. de Klerk joined the congregation of 100,000 people. 4 people, one of them a soldier, were killed when a bomb exploded outside a cafe in the Turkish city of Izmir this morning. 25 people were wounded. The cafe is popular with off-duty soldiers. Turkish police say the bomb, which was hidden in a dustbin, was probably the work of Kurdish separatists. Members of the Raid Church, run by the Reverend Chris Brain, today called for him to resign from the Church of England priesthood. It was the first meeting of Mr Brain's 9 o'clock service congregation since allegations he'd sexually abused some members. Ian Cundall reports.
The young congregation who became victims of abuse at the hands of their manipulative vicar met for the first time in 5 weeks today, stunned by the Reverend Chris Brain's decision to tell his story in a Sunday newspaper.
I've read it, I haven't had time to study it. I don't want to say anything just yet.
In his first public statement, the charismatic vicar, whose late-night services were punctuated by rave music and bikini-clad dancers, admitted abusing female worshippers and said it was ridiculous he should have been ordained.
Well, you could say that it was ridiculous that Dr. Crippen was made a doctor or Burgess and Maclean were made top diplomats. The Church of England is like any other organisation. We don't have an infallible selection process.
Inside this chapel, Chris Brain's flock voted to demand his resignation from the priesthood. Then, worshippers more used to a 500-watt sound system held a quiet service of healing.
There is still an immense amount of shock. There is still an immense amount of pain. And each person is at a different stage within that.
Many are now receiving counselling. Their former vicar is in hiding. Ian Cundall, ITN, Sheffield.
Cricket. Kent are the new Sunday League champions despite losing today. Their nearest rivals Worcestershire had their match abandoned because of rain. The match at Canterbury was also affected by the weather, Kent eventually losing by 5 wickets to the county champions Warwickshire. Nottingham Forest have beaten Everton 3-2 in the only Premiership match today. The pick of the Forest goals, the third, from Ian Wone. The win moves them up to 6th place in the league. That's it for now. The next news from ITN is at 10:30. Till then, goodbye.
Hello, good evening. We've still got that wind in the northeast, meaning the thickest cloud of all for the eastern side of the country and showers persisting close to the east coast. Now, they tend to die off further west with broken cloud and misty patches and some really rather heavy bursts of rain getting into the far south by morning. So straight away, let's pick up on these as we go into tomorrow. Basically, the further north you go, the drier and brighter it gets. Then during the course of the day, it becomes rather dull and damp in the extreme south, more like scattered showers for the rest of England and Wales. And once again, the very best of the weather is reserved for Northern Ireland as well as Scotland. So temperatures come in the range of 15 to 19. 19 is a high of 66. And we have the wind strengthening in the south later on. That's all from me. Join me later for a weather update.
Sponsored by Power Gen, generating electricity, whatever the weather.